Nyambura walked quietly into the wedding hall in Nairobi, dressed in her plain but neat outfit. She didn't have expensive clothes or jewelry, but her smile carried warmth. She wanted nothing more than to witness her brother Kelvin's special day. As she slipped into a corner seat, Janet, the bride, caught sight of her. With a proud smirk, Janet whispered loudly enough for others to hear, "You don't belong here. Leave before you embarrass us." The words cut deep. Nyambura froze, her hands trembling. The laughter of a few guests stung her heart. She thought of slipping out quietly so the day wouldn't be ruined. But just then the priest stopped everything. His calm voice carried across the room. "Before we continue with these vows," he said firmly, "let us acknowledge the one who made this day possible." He held up a document in front of everyone. "Who signed the sponsorship papers for this wedding?" he asked. The hall fell silent. The priest turned the paper around, and Nyambura's name was there, bold and clear. Gasps filled the air. Janet's face drained of color as all eyes turned to Nyambura. The same sister she had mocked was the reason the flowers, the hall, the food, and even her own gown existed that day. Kelvin's eyes softened with tears as he looked at his sister. Applause slowly rose, first from one corner, then the entire hall. Nyambura's shame melted into quiet strength. Janet lowered her face, burning with humiliation, while Nyambura finally stood tall, her dignity shining brighter than anything in the room. Abina arrived quietly at her brother Kojo's wedding in Accra, slipping into one of the back seats. She wore a simple dress, nothing flashy, but her heart was full of joy to see her only brother start a new life. She smiled softly, trying not to draw any attention to herself. But the bride, Efua, noticed her. With a sharp, mocking tone, Efua whispered just loud enough for others to hear, "Poor girls like you shouldn't sit here. This is not your place." The words pierced through Abina's chest. Her smile faded, and her eyes filled with tears. She lowered her gaze, clutching her small handbag tightly. She thought of standing up and walking out, anything to escape the shame pressing on her shoulders. A few guests chuckled quietly, their judgment heavy on her. Before she could move, the priest suddenly raised his hand, halting the ceremony. The music stopped, and the hall grew still. His voice rang out strong and clear. "Before these vows are spoken, the truth must be told," he said. The crowd turned toward him in confusion. Then the priest looked directly at Abina. "This wedding, this joy we are witnessing today, it would never have been possible without her. She is the one who cleared the debts that weighed down this family." The room went silent, heavy with shock. People turned in disbelief, eyes widening at the quiet woman they had dismissed. Kojo's face crumbled with emotion, his lips trembling as tears gathered in his eyes. He looked at his sister with deep gratitude. Slowly, the silence broke into applause. It spread across the hall like a wave, louder and louder, until the room was filled with claps and cheers. Abina sat frozen, her tears now flowing freely, not from shame but from pride and love. Efua's face flushed with embarrassment, her confident smile gone. The same sister she mocked was the very reason the wedding existed at all. Abina had come quietly, unnoticed, but in that moment she became the heart of the entire day. Sarah entered the church in Kampala quietly, hoping no one would notice her. She chose a seat at the very back, happy just to see her brother Peter get married. She didn't have fine clothes or jewelry like the others, but her heart was full of love for him. She watched the decorations, the music, and the crowd with a soft smile, though she felt out of place. Then Miriam, Peter's bride, spotted her. With a cold glare she leaned toward Sarah and hissed, "Please leave. You embarrass us sitting here." The words cut like a knife. Sarah's chest tightened, and her eyes burned with unshed tears. She gripped her hands together, fighting the urge to get up and walk away. She had endured whispers and mockery before, but hearing it on her brother's wedding day made her heart ache even more. Just as Sarah lowered her gaze, the priest suddenly stopped the ceremony. His voice was calm but carried across the room. "Before these vows continue," he said, "there is something the couple and everyone here must know." He turned toward Sarah at the back. "The ring you are about to exchange as a symbol of love, do you know who designed it? Do you know who paid for it?" The entire hall grew still. The priest raised his hand, pointing toward Sarah. It was her. Sarah made sure this symbol of unity existed today. Gasps echoed through the hall. People twisted in their seats to look at the quiet young woman at the back. Peter's eyes widened, and his mouth parted as he realized what his sister had done for him. Miriam's bright smile froze on her face and then slowly vanished, shame flooding her features. The crowd broke into soft murmurs, then into clapping. Tears slid down Sarah's cheeks, but this time they weren't from pain, they were from relief, from finally being seen. Her quiet strength filled the room, and for the first time she wasn't invisible. She was the true light of that wedding. Toriro walked into the wedding hall in Harare with a quiet heart. She wore her neat but simple dress, carrying nothing but love for her brother Tawanda. She wanted to be part of his big day, to see him smile, even if she knew some people in the family didn't treat her kindly. She found a seat at the side, keeping her head low so she wouldn't draw attention. But Ruto, the bride, noticed her. With pride in her voice and a cruel smirk, she pointed and said loudly, "You don't belong here. Get out of my wedding." A ripple of laughter spread among some guests, and Toriro's face burned red. Her heart sank as people stared, waiting for her to walk out in shame. She clutched her small purse, ready to leave quietly to avoid more humiliation. Just then, the priest raised his hand and stopped everything. The music fell silent, and all eyes turned to him. He carried a brown file in his hand, his expression calm but firm. "Before these vows are spoken," he said slowly, "there is something everyone must understand." He opened the file and held up the papers. "This land where you all stand today, the very ground this wedding is being held on, who donated it?" The hall went quiet, breathless. The priest turned and pointed directly at Toriro. "It was her." Gasps spread across the crowd. Heads turned toward Toriro, the same sister who had just been mocked. Tawanda's face shifted, his eyes filling with shame and gratitude as he realized the truth. The guests who had laughed moments earlier now clapped, the sound growing louder until the entire hall was filled with applause. Ruto's smile disappeared. Her face burned as she lowered her head, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Toriro, once humiliated, now stood tall in quiet strength. She didn't need to shout or defend herself. The truth had spoken louder than anything else. In that moment, she became the real hero of the wedding, the one everyone respected. Kayamika arrived quietly at the wedding hall in Lagos, her heart full of love for her brother Nonso. She dressed simply, nothing as flashy as the other guests, but she was happy just to see her brother on his big day. She found a seat at the corner, trying not to draw attention to herself. But Adiz, the bride, spotted her. With a smug smile, she leaned toward her friends and said loudly, "You don't deserve a seat here. People like you should stay outside." Her words were sharp and cruel, and the guests nearby chuckled, fueling Kayamika's shame. Kayamika felt her chest tighten. She swallowed hard and stood slowly, deciding to leave rather than cause a scene. Her eyes stung with tears she fought to hold back. At that moment, the priest raised his hand and stopped the ceremony. The music faded, and the hall grew silent. His voice was steady but carried weight. "One moment before we go forward," he said. Everyone looked at him in surprise. He turned his eyes to Kayamika. "The foundation of this marriage, everything here today, was made possible by her generosity." The words hit the room like thunder. Guests gasped, whispering among themselves. Nonso's eyes filled with tears as he looked at his sister, realizing how much she had sacrificed for him. He knew what the priest meant. Kayamika had quietly supported him, covering expenses, helping him stand tall, even when she had so little for herself. Adiz's confident smile froze, then fell. Her face drained of color as she realized everyone now saw the truth. The same sister she mocked was the very one who had built the ground she was standing on. Slowly applause began. It started softly, then spread through the hall until the entire crowd was clapping for Kayamika. She stood frozen, overwhelmed by emotion, tears rolling down her cheeks. But this time they were tears of pride and relief. She had come quietly, unnoticed. But in that moment, Kayamika became the true heart of the wedding. Adiz lowered her head in shame, while Kayamika finally stood tall, her quiet strength shining brighter than the decorations and the music combined. Diane walked quietly into the church in Kigali, her steps soft and her heart heavy with mixed feelings. She loved her brother Jean deeply, and though she had sacrificed so much for him, she chose a simple dress and sat at the back, hoping to blend in. She didn't need attention, she only wanted to see him happy on his wedding day. But not everyone shared her quiet spirit. As soon as the bride, Claudine, noticed her, she frowned and snapped loudly, "Leave my wedding now. You don't belong here." The harsh words echoed through the hall. Some guests shifted uncomfortably. Others laughed under their breath, and Diane's cheeks burned with shame. Her fingers clutched tightly at her small handbag, and for a moment she thought of standing up and slipping out before anyone could look at her again. Just as Diane lowered her head, the priest suddenly raised his hand, stopping the ceremony. His voice cut through the whispers. "Wait. Before we go on, there is something the whole truth demands." He looked directly at Diane and asked her to stand. The hall grew still. Everyone turned their eyes on her as she rose slowly, trembling. The priest lifted his voice so all could hear. "This gown the bride is wearing, these flowers you see, this hall filled with celebration. Who do you think paid for it?" He paused and then declared clearly, "It was Diane." The room gasped in shock. Murmurs spread like wildfire as guests stared at the quiet woman they had dismissed. Jean's face froze, tears filling his eyes as he realized the weight of what his sister had done for him. Claudine's proud smile vanished, her head dropping as her face burned with embarrassment. Applause began from one side of the hall and grew louder and louder until the whole place shook with clapping. Diane's eyes filled with tears, but this time they were tears of pride. She had been shamed, insulted, and pushed aside, but the truth rose above the noise. In that moment, Diane stood taller than anyone in the room. Her quiet sacrifices were finally seen, and her dignity outshone even the glittering gown she had paid for. The bride could only hide her face, while Diane became the true heart of the wedding. Hannah walked into the church in Addis Ababa quietly, choosing a seat at the very back. Her clothes were plain, her shoes worn, but her heart was full of love for her brother Dawit. She had worked hard, taken small jobs, and endured hunger just to make sure he stayed in school. But she didn't come for recognition. She only wanted to see him happy on his wedding day. The bride, Salam, however, noticed her. With a mocking smile and loud enough for people to hear, Salam said, "We don't want street people here. You are embarrassing us." The words stung Hannah like a slap. Her chest tightened and she lowered her head, her fingers nervously twisting together. Guests chuckled quietly, and Hannah thought of slipping out before more eyes fell on her. But at that very moment, the priest stopped the ceremony mid-prayer. He lifted his hand, and the whole hall fell silent. His voice was calm but powerful. "Before God, truth must be told," he said. Then he turned toward Hannah, his eyes kind. "Do you know who made it possible for this groom to stand here today? The scholarships that raised him, the chance he had to finish school. It was paid by his sister, Hannah." The hall gasped. Guests turned in shock, staring at the woman they had just mocked. Dawit froze where he stood, his lips trembling as tears welled in his eyes. His memories flooded back, Hannah working late nights, selling small goods, sacrificing her own future just to make sure he had one. His heart broke with gratitude. Salam's smile disappeared instantly. Her face turned pale, then red, as whispers rose around her. The same woman she insulted was the very reason her groom stood strong before her. Applause slowly spread through the hall, growing louder with every clap. People rose to their feet, honoring Hannah's sacrifice. She sat stunned, tears flowing freely down her face, but this time they were tears of relief. For years she had carried the weight alone, unseen. Now the truth shone for everyone to see. In that moment, Hannah wasn't the street girl Salam mocked. She was the true foundation of Dawit's success, the quiet hero who gave everything. And her strength lit up the wedding brighter than all the decorations in the hall. Aissatou entered the wedding hall in Dakar quietly, her steps soft, her dress simple, but her heart full of love for her brother Idris. She had sacrificed much over the years, but she didn't come to boast. She only wanted to sit quietly and watch him begin a new chapter in his life. She chose a seat near the back, hoping not to draw attention. But Caddy, the bride, noticed her. With a sharp tone and a proud smirk, she said loudly, "Go home, you're not wanted here." Her words cut through the music, and several guests turned to stare. Some even laughed under their breath. Isitu's heart sank, her eyes burning with tears. She lowered her gaze, trying to stay calm, but shame pressed heavily on her shoulders. The ceremony moved on until it was time for the vows. Just as Idris reached for Caddy's hand, the priest suddenly raised his own hand, stopping everything. The hall fell silent. He picked up a folder from the table beside him and held up a document. His voice carried with authority. "Before we continue, the truth must be told. This new house that the couple will live in, the deed shows one name. This gift came from Isitu." Gasps echoed across the hall. All heads turned toward Isitu, the quiet sister who had been told to leave. Idris froze, his lips parting in shock as the weight of her sacrifice hit him. He remembered the long hours she worked, the savings she guarded so carefully, all to secure his future. His eyes filled with tears as he looked at her with gratitude. Caddy's face burned red, her proud smile disappearing instantly. She looked around helplessly, but there was nowhere to hide. The very sister she mocked was the reason she had a home to step into after the wedding. Applause began softly from one corner of the hall, then spread until the whole room rose to their feet. People clapped, cheered, and even shouted Isitu's name. Overwhelmed, she covered her face as tears streamed down, this time from pride and love, not shame. In that moment, Isitu was no longer the unwanted guest. She became the true hero of the day, the one whose sacrifice built the foundation of the marriage itself. Chipo entered the wedding hall in Lusaka quietly, her dress plain but clean, her smile soft and full of love for her brother. She had done so much for him in silence, but she never wanted recognition. She only came to witness his happiness. She found a small seat at the side, away from the glamorous guests, trying not to draw attention to herself. But the bride, with arrogance in her voice, suddenly sneered. "Why let a failure attend this wedding?" The words hung heavy in the air. Some guests laughed, others exchanged glances, and Chipo's heart sank. Her eyes watered, and shame burned her cheeks. She looked down, gripping her hands tightly, fighting back tears. She thought of standing up and leaving quietly to avoid more humiliation. Before she could move, the priest suddenly stopped the ceremony. He turned to face the crowd, his voice deep and commanding. "Wait. Before these vows continue, the truth must be spoken." He then looked straight at Chipo, his eyes steady. "This couple is standing here today because of her. She is the one who secretly paid the bride price." The hall fell completely silent, then gasps spread like wildfire. All eyes turned toward Chipo, the woman mocked as a failure. Her brother froze, his body trembling as the truth sank in. Tears welled in his eyes as memories rushed back. Chipo working extra shifts, selling her belongings, sacrificing everything without saying a word, just so he could stand proudly in this moment. The silence broke into chaos. Applause, cheers, and shouts filled the air. Guests who had laughed at her moments earlier now clapped for her with respect. Her brother's tears finally spilled over as he left the altar, rushing to embrace his sister tightly, sobbing into her shoulder. "You gave me everything," he whispered, his voice breaking. The bride's proud face collapsed into shame. She looked down, unable to meet anyone's eyes. The same woman she mocked was the true foundation of her marriage. Chipo stood there, tears flowing freely, but now they were tears of pride and relief. She had come quietly, unnoticed, but in that moment she became the soul of the entire wedding. Her quiet sacrifice spoke louder than any insult, and the whole hall knew who the real hero was. Naledi walked quietly into the wedding hall in Gaborone, her dress simple but neat. She didn't want to draw attention. She only wanted to see her brother celebrate his big day. She sat at the back, smiling softly, even though she knew most of the family often looked down on her. As the ceremony went on, the bride, Boitamelo, leaned toward her friends with a fake smile and whispered just loud enough, "She should be outside, not here." The words pierced Naledi's heart. Her chest tightened and her smile faded. She lowered her gaze, trying to ignore the sting of humiliation. Some nearby guests chuckled, making her feel even smaller. Just before the rings were exchanged, the priest suddenly raised his hand. The hall went silent. He held up a paper and spoke with authority. Before this marriage continues, there is something the couple and everyone here should know. His eyes swept across the crowd before landing on Naledi. The sponsorship letter for this entire wedding was signed by her. Gasps filled the room. Guests turned in shock, eyes landing on Naledi, the sister they had dismissed. Boitemelo's confident smile cracked instantly, her face burning as whispers spread through the hall. Nonso, Naledi's brother, looked at her with tears in his eyes, realizing the truth of her quiet sacrifice. Slowly, the silence turned into clapping. Then the applause grew louder, filling the hall until everyone was on their feet. Naledi sat frozen, her eyes welling with tears, not from shame this time but from pride. She had entered quietly, overlooked and mocked, but in that moment she became the true star of the wedding. Her quiet love and sacrifice outshone everything else in the room.